Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to my channel. It's Brittany here with another video to help you guys live a happy, healthy, awesome life in a wheelchair. And on today's video, we are talking about wheelchair sizing. I recently got a new wheelchair and it was a huge process. I've had 4 wheelchairs in the 22 years, almost 22 years that I've been in a wheelchair. And every single time that I've gotten a wheelchair in the past, I was not involved in the process at all. Obviously, a little bit, it's my wheelchair, they're measuring me, things like that. But I wasn't really paying attention to what the measuring process was, all of the different things that needed to go into picking the wheelchair. I just let the vendor and the occupational therapist kind of choose what they thought was right for me. And I always, had a decent wheelchair. It was okay. But now that I am way more knowledgeable about all of the things that go into choosing a correct wheelchair, I know that all of those wheelchairs were actually measured incorrectly. And so this last wheelchair that I ordered, the one that I'm sitting in right now, I wanted to be intimately involved in every step of the process. I wanted to know why each of the measurements was important, what the different things on the chair meant, how they changed the actual feeling and usability of the chair, all of these different things. And so I don't want any of you guys to have an incorrectly ordered wheelchair based on what somebody else thinks that you need. And so I wanted to do this video so that you guys are knowledgeable when you go into the process of ordering a wheelchair. And it's not just the healthcare provider or the vendor or whoever that's making the choices for you. I invited Reg McClellan to be on the YouTube channel because he is actually the gentleman that I ordered my current wheelchair from. He's been in a wheelchair for many years and he sells wheelchairs. So he is very knowledgeable about how to guide somebody through the process of getting an appropriately sized wheelchair that fits them and their lifestyle. So stick around, we will be chatting with Reg in a few minutes. Thank you so much for letting me pick your brain. I'm going to let you introduce yourself and just tell everybody who you are and how you even got into the business of selling wheelchairs.
Great. Well, thanks for the opportunity, Brittany. I got involved, I guess, all by accident in the industry. I ended up in the chair in '72, and I had a great group of PTs, OTs that I worked with through rehab, and they were big on encouraging people to get involved in sport. I got involved in basketball, in wheelchair basketball, and met some folks there. And there was a fellow that was building some units down in California, and that was in the late '70s. And I wanted to get one of those. I thought that this rigid chair idea was probably good, and so I tried to get one of the dealers to pick one up and that sort of thing, but it wasn't going to happen. I mean, at the time, people were thinking, well, who would want a chair that didn't fold, and of course, it was a chair that had product from the aircraft industry and from the bike industry. So it had quick release axles, the first one with quick release axles.
Oh, neat.
And, so it was a no-brainer. You just pop the wheels off and, throw it anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So I went down to California, picked one up, and in the process, ended up being offered the Canadian distributorship for the product. I ended up accepting the challenge, I guess, and man, we had 250 of those units sold before the first 50 came in. Wow. And so it was obviously a product that was needed at the time, And from there, we've just continued to be involved. And anytime we see any new product on the market that we feel that has an application and would help meet somebody's need, then we'll bring that product in. So we're distributing about 25 different products, I guess, right now, and we sell that through to the dealer network.
That is very cool that you've kind of seen the whole history of the rigid chair like come into being. And it's neat that, you know, people didn't even think that that would be a popular thing. Like, who would want a chair that doesn't fold? That's not user friendly. Like, what is that? And yet, you know, I can't even imagine somebody that is a paraplegic at least wanting to have a folding chair. If you could just explain what camber is and what that does on the chair.
Well, camber is certainly putting your wheels like that. And when the first rigid chairs came out, we ended up putting camber on the wheels to be able to provide a lot more side stability for people on a basketball court, for example. And that's where there's a tremendous benefit to it. But unless you're, you know, wheeling an awful lot outside and most of the sidewalks are a little bit slanted, and you're sitting taller, your center of gravity is a little bit higher, I would think that you might want to have a little bit of camber in that situation. But for the most part, on a daily use product, people are now wanting the chair to be as narrow as possible, and therefore they're not going with the additional camber, because for every degree of camber you put on the chair, you're adding about 3/4 of an inch to your overall width. It's pretty easy to look at when you're looking at pairs and quads, for example. It's pretty easy to sort of look at people in maybe 4 different categories.
Yeah.
So as a class 1, that would these are actually more like basketball classifications.
Okay.
So if a person is a class 1, they might be say a T6 or 7 lesion and above, and that would mean that there wouldn't be any abdominals. They wouldn't be able to fix their pelvis in the chair. So you'd probably want to be able to do something in the chair setup to be able to accommodate for that. And generally speaking, that would be a little bit more what we would call squeeze, as in front seat height to the rear seat height would probably be a little bit more, as in 3 to 4 inches of squeeze to be able to get the person into a situation where they're able to sit and put both hands out and be balanced in the chair, right? So a class 2 might be somebody that is a lower lesion, say T9 to T12, that sort of thing. But still, they would have some abdominals and some back muscles, but they wouldn't necessarily be able to push off with a leg. So they still wouldn't be able to fix their pelvis in the chair. And a class 3 might be able to push off at least with one leg, and they would be a lower lesion than say T12. And they would have a little bit more balance in the chair. So, generally speaking, they would probably require a little bit less squeeze, than a class 2, for example. And a class 4 would be somebody that would definitely be able to fix their pelvis in the chair, would probably be a single above knee, below knee amp, that sort of disability, or somebody that has had a lot of recovery but is able to push off with their legs. And then, of course, they would have more balance in the chair as well, and they'd be able to probably sit more 90-90. Now, that's just a general sort of rule of thumb. That person may wish to sit with a lot of squeeze, whereas another person that is a T4 lesion may wish to sit level. And, that would be certainly their prerogative and how they would be able to best meet their balance needs in the chair.
So just to define squeeze again, that is where your butt basically is lower than your knees. And that,
or higher,
that's the degree of squeeze.
Speaking on the seat and the back, we would call this squeeze.
Oh, okay.
And we would call this dump.
Oh, so there's an
Generally,
actual angle, like when
when the
dump.
angle of the back changes with the angle of the seat, yeah, we would call that more dump, I guess. Whereas we use the term squeeze if we're just talking about the seat position. And generally speaking, we are talking about the seat position because we'd like to see the back be in a position to keep the person more upright
Okay.
and in a position where they're ready position
Yeah.
to be able to wheel.
Okay. So, and squeeze is primarily to improve balance for people with limited abdominal muscles.
That's right, to give a person a little bit better balance, maneuverability in the product, and that sort of thing. Most of the order forms start out with seat width.
So that would be like the outside of your thigh to the outside of your thigh.
That's
So,
correct. When we talk in terms of class 1s and class 2s, at least when we're doing specs, we like to make sure that if the person is not able to fix their pelvis in the chair, that we want to be able to have the inside sitting position defined, and wherever possible to try to have a rigid side guard that is
yeah.
going to define that inside sitting position. We feel that if there is a little bit of pressure on the thigh, that's going to be a positive thing for the person that is not able to fix himself in the chair. So we're providing that so that they have better stability in the chair, better support in the chair. That enhances maneuverability, and we would argue that it enhances pressure distribution as well.
Yeah.
Because some of that loose muscle tissue, if you're if you're on a flat surface and you sit on the flat surface, that loose muscle tissue is just going to go out as far as it can go out.
Yeah, so pancake butt.
Yeah, so we'd prefer to keep that closer to the body, where some of that muscle tissue is going to come up and some of it is going to be underneath you. And so we feel that there'd be better support underneath the ITs, the ischial tuberosity area, to be able to, I guess, provide a little bit more padding and less likelihood of having any skin issues in that area.
So my question with that is, if somebody measures outside to thigh and say they're like, 16.5 inches, but they're not sort of squishing their thighs in at the time, do you take off 1/2 inch? Like, how do you then know, like for that pressure, how many inches to take off? Or do you get somebody to sort of push on your thighs and then measure? How do you measure properly that way?
Yeah, we would, again, each individual would be different, of course, but we would have no difficulty putting a book on either side and simulating that kind of pressure for the person. Yeah.
Okay, that makes total sense. Okay, so outside of thigh to outside of thigh. Then what's the other measurements on the legs that you would be doing?
Yeah, then we're looking at seat depth, and that's usually back of the front of the cane to the back of the knee, basically. We say back of bum to back of knee, and depending on the foot position, you'd probably have or want to have 1.5 inches, 2 inches behind the calf and the seat sling, so that you have good pressure distribution, but that you're not having the seat sling go into the back of the calf, and causing any kind of pressure there. Just to finish up on the other measurements, front seat height, rear seat height.
I guess it would depend on how long somebody's legs are from their knee to their foot, the seat height, or how does the seat height get determined?
Yeah, depending on the front frame angle of the chair, that would make a determination, help to make a determination there. Yes, generally speaking, a person that's 6'6" is probably going to be sitting a little bit taller than the person that is 5'6". But
Yeah.
again, it is an individual preference, and you just want to make sure that whatever seat height the person is at, that's a seat height that is going to be functional for them, whether it be in the washroom, or whether it be at a desk at their work, or wherever.
Is there a minimum? So if say somebody wanted, like, their seat depth was a certain length, but they didn't want it very big. They just wanted a short seat. Is there a minimum depth that you can go with that wheelbase that makes that wheelbase unsafe? Like, what
No.
number is that?
Yeah, if you're building a chair where you own every measurement on the chair, you can certainly have a longer wheelbase and a short seat if you wanted. You can
Oh,
build
okay.
it any which way that you want. But generally speaking, with most of the commercial chairs on the market, if you end up with a shorter seat, then you're going to end up with a shorter wheelbase as well.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, and a rule of thumb for us is anything that is, say, from the back of the backrest to the center of the caster pot, where
Yeah.
your stem bolt goes up. If we're under 16 inches for a person that is anywhere from, say, 5'8" to 6'2", then we want to take another look at that, find out
Okay.
what the person's balance factor is, and
Okay.
so on and so forth. Everybody wants to have the shortest chair,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
that's certainly understandable. Another rule of thumb for folks that, if you're sitting back in the chair and you flop forward and you take a measurement from the front of the shoulder down to the ground, if that's coming close to your caster pot where your front caster is, hey, then you've got a fairly good stable front end on that chair.
Oh,
And
that
if it,
makes sense. So if
and
we
if it,
lean forward in our chair and our shoulder is in line with our caster,
yeah,
oh,
then
then that's a good
then
wheelbase.
that should mean that you have
Pretty good
a
stability.
good solid wheelbase.
Okay.
If it's a long ways back, then chances are you're going to be tippy when you
Tippy.
flop down onto your knees, and of course, if it's in front of that, then you're moving probably an 18-wheeler kind of thing. The important thing on maneuverability is making sure that we get the center of gravity good for the individual, and that means having as much of your body weight over top of the back axle as you're able to work with, so that the chair ends up doing more of the work than you. If you've got all of your body weight in front of the back axle, then you're pushing your body weight and the weight of the chair. Whereas if your body weight is over top of the rear axle or even behind it, then the front end of your chair, of course, is very light,
Mhm.
and it feels like the chair is doing more of the work. It's less taxing to you. Now, the only thing you have to do there is balance off, making sure that you either have an anti-tip device, or you're comfortable with whatever that balance factor is, and you can get by without having an anti-tip on the unit.
So how does somebody determine then what, like, center of gravity is right for them? Is that completely a personal choice, or is that something that, like, an OT or something helps you decide? How do you figure out, especially if you're not knowledgeable about center of gravity and you don't really know what you have now, it was just chosen for you, or if you're new in a wheelchair and this is your first wheelchair, how do you know if you're going to like having, a lighter front and therefore a tippier chair, or if you're not going to like that? Like, how does one figure that out?
It's been our experience that most chairs that go into service with the COG, with the center of gravity being very, very stable for the end user, whether they're a brand new user or first chair like or 10th chair or whatever. They want to be able to ensure that the person is not going to have any kind of an accident falling over backwards in the chair, for example.
Yeah.
We tend to go the other way. We tend to set a chair up so that it's a little bit more tippy backwards, lighter on the front end.
Yeah.
And you know, we have to gauge that, of course, for the person that they're not sure how this is going to work, and it's not a fixed center of gravity anyway. Then, you know, we would certainly tell them, listen, why don't we put anti-tips on this unit and set it up this way, and let's see how that works for you. You know, and
Yeah.
if we have to change it, I'd rather change it going forward. You know, moving the wheels back. I'd rather do it that way than the opposite, because it would be our experience that the chair goes out, initially feels, oh, this is very light on the front end, I'm going to have to be careful. And then a week later, they've forgotten all about it, and you know, the chair is working very well for them. You know,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So
yes, and I agree that, like, I've had lots of different chairs, some that are very not tippy at all, and this one where it's got a good center of gravity for me so that the front is very light, and it's much easier to go over a bump, to even go over gravel or something, because when you give a push, the wheels do lift up a tiny bit. You're not tipping over, but the front casters aren't constantly digging into things. And so it seems a little counterintuitive, especially to somebody that might be new to being in a wheelchair, that you would actually want a wheelchair that's slightly tippy. But it's much easier to function every day when you have a tippier wheelchair, because you do get used to the center of gravity. It's not something that takes you, you know, like 2 years to get used to it. You know, it might take you 2 days to realize how tippy a chair is. And all you have to do is fall over one time, and then you're like, oh, I pushed too hard going forward. And so, yeah, it's definitely something that as a wheelchair user for many years, that I would prefer to have a chair that's much easier to do a wheelie in and all that stuff. I have friends that their chair is really hard to do a wheelie in, and I'm like, how do you go anywhere?
yeah, the other drawback with that as well is that if you hit something, a crack on the sidewalk, you're more likely to, you know, stop, and that's more likely to hurt a person, because you know, if you're not
right out.
if you're not expecting it and you lose your balance, then you're biting the dust. And if you're a little bit lighter on the front end, of course, you're going to hit that and probably glance over it rather than dig into it.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that the wheelchair that I had when that was first ordered for me when I was 13, I had it until I went to university, and I cannot count how many times I hit one of those, like, the manhole covers, where my wheel went right into it and out into the street I went. Or like down a ramp, I would hit like the little like edge at the bottom that was like a metal piece. Out I went so many times. And in the last 2 wheelchairs that I've used, they have a way nicer center of gravity, and I have never fallen out forward ever, because my front casters don't hit something, and when they do, like you say, they're kind of like riding up a little higher. So yeah, so it's much better. With the wheels, does that just change how high you sit then on the wheelchair? Or like, why would somebody choose a bigger wheel? Why would somebody choose, you know, say a 26-inch wheel versus a 24-inch wheel on the back, or a 4-inch caster versus a 6-inch caster? And how does that change? Does that change the height of the chair?
No, I think what you need to do is you need to determine what that height is going to be, front and back, what your front seat height and your rear seat height is going to be. And then you determine from there what size of wheel you're going to best use to meet that need. And then, of course, it depends on your body makeup as well as to what your reach is for that wheel. People use as a rule of thumb, when the person is sitting in the chair, to drop their hands down and their fingers coming to the, you know, to the middle of the hub, that sort of thing. But again, that's a personal preference, and on a pushing style that a person would have, that sort of thing.
If somebody is interested in working with 49 Bespoke, do you only work with people like primarily in Canada, or do you work with people in North America? Like if somebody would like to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
No,
And yeah, where does your service sort of end in terms of location, geography?
if we've got anything to add to whoever it is that is building a unit, or getting into one of the products, we'll work with them wherever they are. If there's selling restrictions, as in if it's a product that we're not able to sell outside of Canada, then we'll hook them up with somebody in that area. But any information that we have, we're more than happy to share that with with whomever.
Thank you so much to Reg for coming on, letting me pick his brain all about how to properly measure for a wheelchair. The point of this video is that you guys spend some time to really understand what the measurements mean for your wheelchair and for what the actual wheelchair is going to do, how it's going to fit, how it's going to maneuver, all of those things, so that when you get a wheelchair, and it has been measured properly, it fits well, you can balance in it well, you feel you can move in it well, and it's just overall an extension of you, but it's not, uncomfortable, it's not causing you problems wheeling, all of those things. Like nobody wants a wheelchair that they're not going to be able to use. So I hope this video was helpful to you. I will put all of the stuff that we talked about in a little cheat sheet for you to print out. Reg provided a cool little handout with a lot of information on it, so I'll put that in the description below as a download. I will also include a bunch of helpful things that I have found across the internet that are already out there, just resources that talk about wheelchair measuring and websites that you can refer to in case you want to have something else to look at. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. Until next time, guys, see ya.